I'm gonna drop a link into the chat. Just to the. I can explain it later, but this is to some guidance documents from our Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program. Which we're gonna talk about a little bit.
Yeah. In case I have to put something in the chat.
Dexter.
Hey, Willie.
Welcome, Patrick.
Hello.
So we still have people coming in, so we'll give it another couple of minutes.
This is all the people here.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
It's so great to have all of you join us today. I'd like 2 minutes is good. I think we can start talking.
Great. Yeah.
Well, welcome to our drinking water sharing session number 4. We appreciate you being here. I'm Willie. I think I must know all of you, I hope. Hopefully we all know each other. If anybody is new, please raise your hand and we'll do some introductions. Or if you want to introduce yourself or anything like that. I always like introductions at the beginning. So I guess we can just set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Willie Nickerson, Division Engineer with the Drinking Water Groundwater Protection Division. I think we'll just introduce our team, and if anybody else wants to say who they are, raise your hand.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm Sita Larson. I'm the Engineering and Water Resources Section Supervisor. Nathan?
I'm Nathan Callis. I'm another division engineer.
Allison Murphy, another division engineer.
Tiana?
Sienna Winston. I'm working with the division engineers, and I organized the original share.
Yeah, Sienna is our contact person for these meetings right now, so if you want to be added or add anybody or have any suggestions on who to add to the contact list or topics for discussion, or if you want to have some time to talk about whatever, we want these to be open and make space for everybody to share as well as us. Today we came up with a couple slides to kind of share what we've been working on outside of our normal permit writing responsibilities. And some, I mean, really the projects that we've been working on are tasks that we find eat up a lot of our time, or that we need to define a process for. So today we've pulled out PER review. We hope to talk about the discussions we've had internally about how we conduct the PER review, and what we want to be doing in order to make our process more efficient and transparent and consistent. And then we're also going to talk about some of the discussions we've had with the Office of Professional Regulation and how we want to develop a process for to coincide with our general construction permit auditing, and sort of set some metrics on when we might make a referral or a complaint to the Office of Professional Regulation. I'm going to start sharing our slides. I didn't see any hands go up for introductions, so um, we won't jump to anybody, but thank you all for being here again. Let me see if I can figure out how to share these. Also, any questions, if you don't want to interrupt, just, you can use the chat function. And we'll make space to talk about those. Or raise your hand and we can just switch to discussion. Because we're hoping to, why don't I just share this?
No, you're good. You're sharing it.
Okay, great. Did I share it as a slideshow or just as like?
No, you're sharing your screen, but maybe you can do F5 and then. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So we've got that too. We're just gonna start talking about preliminary engineering report review process. I did drop this link. I don't know how easily it can be seen, but we've started populating this page on our website with the recording. I think the recordings there's links to the recordings from these sharing sessions, and there's other documents that we've been posting on our website there. So if you want to check that out and see what we've got, we hope to continue putting more resources on there. And I put that there because it's very hard to navigate to that page. And so I usually just write in that address. So what we're working on is creating a standardized review process for each of our division engineers to work on. We don't have this really written down internally, and there's 3 of us doing it. We want to make sure we do it the same, and we also have 2 positions that we're hiring. We want to make sure that we can explain to our new employees what this is and hopefully have them do it as well. So we're creating a standardized and documented review of preliminary engineering reports. What we want to do is describe the division process for this review. We're hoping also to create a checklist of agenda items to use at progress review meetings, 30, 60, 90% review meetings. That we can either suggest to you all to include in the agenda items, or we can use them as a checklist of what questions we might want to bring up during those meetings. And then finally, we're hoping to create a progress report template for the division engineers to document the progress of the PER, so that if one of us needs to pass it on to somebody else, there's a clear statement of the last piece of work that we were involved in and what the status of that review is. I created this slide because one of the things we found when talking about this is it's really helpful to define when we get PERs and why the division is looking at them. So the division provides approval for PERs. We can provide concurrence on problems that might be described in the PER, on whether the solutions or alternatives are feasible or not, and we can provide comments and concurrence on the evaluation of different alternatives. We also would want to provide concurrence that the PER is recommending an alternative or solution that will address any identified sanitary deficiencies that might be described in a permit to operate or a sanitary survey letter. And then probably the majority of the PERs we see are in some way related to funding applications, and the 2 reasons we provide approval for these is when we get a PER that has been created in connection with a project that is applying to be on the priority list, having a submitted approved PER, gains, points on priority ranking. And so the link I dropped at the beginning of the meeting is to where these guidance documents are located and the descriptions for how the PER is influenced in that process. And then also in order to be approved for step 2, which is final design step, funding through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program, you have to have an approved PER. So those are the kind of main reasons why we end up reviewing these PERs. Occasionally, we might see a PR that's not directly related to these things. If a water system or consulting engineer just wants us to know that one of these reports was completed or have us recorded in our archive. But primarily, this is why we provide approval for PRs. One other thing that's come up in our discussions is that PERs are a planning phase document in the DWSRF world. That's called step 1. There are other planning phase documents that can be funded under step 1 that are different than a PER, and we just wanted to make sure that preliminary engineering reports are they're a different type of planning phase report from other planning phase reports, like an asset management plan or hydraulic evaluation or capital improvements plan, or there are various different titles you can use. There's a lot of crossover between these things, and oftentimes you can pick out, like a PER might have hydraulic evaluation contained in it, maybe necessary to complete that. You could pick out different parts of it, but they aren't all equal. So kind of going through how our process might change and what we're looking at between PERs that are funded through a step 1 SRF loan versus PERs that come in, they're self-funded by a water system. So with the step 1 funded PERs, we'd expect everything to follow the SRF guidance documents that are published on the SRF website. We want that the PER needs to be in the Rural Utility Services 1780-2 format. And the division will require either a 30-60 and a 90 progress review meeting, or perhaps just a 60 and a 90%, depending on the scope of the report. And then all that is kind of contained or reviewed at the start of the project when an engineering service agreement is drafted. The division will review that as part of the step 1 funding application, and that scope that's included in that agreement will have our input on it. For self-funded projects or not projects, but reports that aren't coming from the SRF step 1 funding source, we see a lot more variability in the format that we get, because we did the EJCDC format wasn't necessarily part of the engineering service agreement. We didn't have any input on the scope. We might not see the same 1780-2 bulletin format, which is a very nice template on how to organize the PER. And so we get a lot more variability, and they are a little bit more harder for us to review because it's not as clear why we're getting them or what the objective of them is. But ideally, we'd want them to follow the same guidance as for SRF funded reports, and we'd also want that same USDA bulletin template for to make the report as most useful as it can be for funding, and also readable for us. And we just wanted to reiterate, we often get self-funded PERs for eligibility to get funding for final design for step 2 funding. And then, and that ends up, from our perspective, it can be kind of a bottleneck, sort of. We have to review this PER, and we're also dealing with an application for final design, and then there's kind of a lot of work that we need to do all at once. So we're developing basically an SOP of how we're going to do this review, and all the items that we want to make sure we look at every time. We don't have anything to share on that yet. This is more just like an update on, this is a project we're working on, and we hope to have this process completed soon. But this picture, we wanted to share a picture so that this me talking wasn't as boring as I imagine it is. This is from Ray Solomon's recent trip out to Colorado, and he sent us a bunch of pictures of water bodies, and we asked him what the water quality was, but he couldn't tell just from the taste, which I find hard to believe after this many years of serving water systems. This other document that we've started populating, and we hope to get some input from everybody here on when we have something to share, is whether it'd be useful to have kind of a checklist of agenda items possibly to include in an engineering agreement scope to go along with, like, when the division says we want a 30, 60, 90 meeting, what we actually say is something like, we want a 30% progress review meeting and we're interested in these topics. And we want a 60% project review meeting and we're interested in these topics. So kind of, that's one idea. We're also thinking, like, maybe it's just something we bring out at these meetings and use it for our own kind of review of, are these items discussed at these different stages of report progress. So if you've ever had any thoughts like, I don't know what it is the division cares about at 30%, and I'd really love to know that. Or you're like, this really should be done at 60%, and if the division's going to offer a template or checklist of agenda items, I will want to make sure that everybody has got a project location plan by 60%. I don't know, something like that, and you think we've got some opinion on that. This is kind of a call to please provide your input. And I expect we're going to share more on this as we have something to share.
And I guess I just want to add here that obviously, you know, us reviewing sort of our internal process for reviewing the PERs is sort of part of us expecting an uptick in submitted PERs with all this infusion of federal funding to upgrade drinking water infrastructure. So the idea of developing these agenda items is to sort of make the expectations to you submitting these reports more clear, which would then hopefully result in a more sort of efficient review process. But I guess I'm curious to hear if there are any concerns in terms of doing that, for example, making it too confined and rigid, or if you want the flexibility, because that's kind of what we're, you know, if we are to make these agenda items, just to hear, like, how would that potentially impact your workflow, so that we can consider that in our process.
So that's all these pieces kind of go together with how we've been talking about defining what we look at in the review and what steps we want to document. And that the agenda item piece, we've kind of come up with that because we want to be able to document it, and we want to be able to set those expectations Seal was talking about, but also make sure that when we're looking for something, yeah, that's what it means, to set the expectations. When we're looking for something, everybody else knows that we're gonna be looking for that too. And then we hope to have some kind of standardized post-meeting notes so that if something comes up at a progress review, like the division noticed some red flag, like there's something from sanitary survey that hasn't been mentioned, or some proposed solution doesn't meet the water supply rule. We want to make sure that we are documenting that consistently and communicating that timely. The kind of the main function of our progress review meetings in step one funded projects is to release funding holds. So the division wants to make sure that we are involved in the progress of these reports, and one of the ways we do that is we ask the SRF program to put in funding holds at different steps of the project, so that when those milestones are met, we tell the SRF program that milestone was met, you can release funding for the next stage of the project of the report. And then we also, sometimes we go through these reports and we have these progress meetings and realize that like source exploration needs to happen. So there needs to be an amendment to the planning phase work, and that might put things on hold and change the original scope, just add to the scope. And we hope those progress review meetings are a place where that can be captured, acknowledged, and move forward from. We also want to be able to say, seems like there's some alternatives that you might want to add to the consideration. And then we want to be acknowledging whether or not the report is on track. If we're at 30% and at the 30% progress review meeting, but 60% of the funding has been spent, or the project scope has been 60% of the time has been spent, but we don't even have like a draft. We don't have like a report scale. Like we don't have what you'd expect at 30%. All of the data hasn't been collected at that stage, or stakeholders haven't been identified. I don't know exactly what would be in the 30%. That's what we hope to create. But then we'd want to be taking notes of those and sharing those comments on what we're observing. Any recommendations on what we should be looking for, what you're looking for yourselves at these different stages? Just we get that in there as well.
And before you skip to the next one, we can give people a chance to think and maybe provide comments if they want, because oh great, Wayne is having a comment. I'm realizing we're sharing not the slide, that page, but we can take Wayne's comment first.
Blending here.
Yeah, so Willie, just to comment on the review meetings, just got to be careful about not adding kind of unnecessary meetings and cost to some of these studies. I'm guessing probably 80% of these are more kind of waterline replacements, reasonably straightforward. Maybe the other 20 are storage, supply, something variation of that. And, now we've got clients that want to do in-person meetings, sometimes virtual. Okay, I would say usually 90% is maybe more a presentation of the proposed project to the board, water commissioners, select board. So we got to be careful for 80% of these PERs not to add a lot of unnecessary kind of tasks and costs. A lot of us have clients that are away a couple hours. So, think about sending 2 people to a 30, 60, 90% meeting. So just want to be mindful of that. And obviously, the important time to catch that is when the draft TSA goes in for review. So just want to make sure we're not adding, unnecessary time and cost to these, and they're kind of appropriate for the scope of the particular PER.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you're taking notes. I think that's a great point, and I think it is something we're also thinking about, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've implemented in the past also with some of these projects that are falling under the general permit now. They don't go through all 3 meetings, for example, for that exact reason. So, but that's good feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the parts of the PER that we're hoping can integrate with the general permit is the PER identifies if the project should be eligible for a construction general permit. That's one piece, but to speak more directly to what you were saying, Wayne, I think in general, we're not really looking for more than a 60% progress review meeting on the water main replacement PERs or in the shorter ones, and we're talking internally about how extensive we really want, like what our review of those types of PERs would be, because oftentimes there isn't much in the alternatives analysis. There's not much in the life cycle cost analysis. Many times it's very clear that the existing water main is excessively leaking or tuberculated or way past its, the known design life of it. And so the justification for the project is very clear, and the need for multiple alternatives analysis and life cycle cost comparisons are minimal. So yeah, I appreciate that comment. We definitely want to keep our effort in line with the scope of the project as well.
Any other comments? I mean, we'll also, once we have, obviously this is the time to get the comments. Once we've defined the process, it's gonna be, a little late, but obviously we will be sharing once we have something more, to share. We'll bring that up, and then there'll be a second time to sort of provide comments. So we can move on. Let me just share my screen here. All right. So, so the second topic we wanted to bring up, oh, wait a minute, is there something in the chat, maybe? No comment. Okay, no, all right, great. And the second topic we wanted to bring up here was the general construction permit and sort of the auditing process for that construction permit, because as you all know, it's a self-certification process, but we've internally decided that somehow we want to create a process of which we can audit a few of those projects to make sure that that self-certification process is valid. It's being used the way it's supposed to be used, and so we're sort of discussing how that should look. So the permit became available in February of 2022, and as I just said, it's a self-certification process. You guys are applying on A&R online, and then there's a bunch of eligibility questions that will either direct you into the general permit or into that we call the individual permit that goes through review by one of the division engineers. And as you answer those eligibility criteria questions and then get pushed into the general permit process, then there's a self-certification there saying that all the things have been answered and according to sort of the available information. And so far we've received and issued 31 permits under that program. So we're thinking well, we're not really at 1 year yet, but we want to sort of have come up with a process by that 1 year mark to do some auditing. So what we're thinking about is basically what should that look like? X% of permits to be reviewed for consistency. So is that a 5%, 10%? And then we'll be reviewing it as sort of spot checking, or as we're getting permits in as part of the admin review, there might be some projects that are going to be flagged and they could go through a review, or it could be a completely randomized review process where we're just selecting a random set of 5 to 10% of projects. And then those will then be getting some level of review where we look at the design drawing submitted, sort of the answers that were submitted as part of the general permit application. And then what we have to do as part of that auditing process is then establish some kind of decision tree on when to say this was not answered according to what we see in the design drawings, or what we know in terms of system not allowed to expand, or the water system project, the project areas outside of the surface area. So maybe it should have had sort of an individual review, or, some of those things. So as part of sort of defining this decision tree on when what to do when we come across inconsistencies, because that's really the next step. Is we do the audit. If we find that some of them are inconsistent, what do we do with them? So what we've been talking about is basically say, okay, well, one way we can deal with these inconsistencies is to file complaints with Office of Professional Regulation, because that's who sort of is regulating licensing professional engineering licenses. So, and as part of that, we were also thinking about, well, we might also come across other things in our review work that may be eligible for filing a complaint with OPR. So it doesn't necessarily have to just be the general permit auditing process that results in a complaint filed with OPR, but there could be other things. Some of those things that we've sort of talked about are construction work without a permit. That's one thing that, it's not, you're not supposed to do any construction work without a permit. So when we come across that, is that enough to file a complaint with OPR, or does it trigger some notification to you guys to say that's not what you're supposed to do under the regulations? And if we find that you do it again, we might file a complaint. So kind of deciding on the level, the number of these inconsistencies, and when then to push it to OPR. It could also be significant discrepancies between the approved design and what the surveyors then find in the field. Making sure that, it's not that the review process isn't just a front and then things are being installed in a very different way. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. So as part of that, we needed to sort of understand OPR's complaint process. So so that we know, will they evaluate and review all complaints, or do they do some kind of decision process to say this one will review and investigate, these ones we won't? So we met with OPR and sort of just got like a little bit of a background into their their complaint and enforcement process. So this is sort of this is the notes I was taking from that meeting that I'm sharing here. So what they were telling us was that they, on a yearly basis, receive 600 to 800 complaints per year. And this is across all of the licenses that they sort of regulate. And these complaints come from public and from sort of private residences. So anything from nurses that are taking pain medication from patients to the vet didn't help my dog when I asked them to help it. So it's like the scale of the complaints are really big, and OPR was sort of curious, and we're going to have continuous meetings now to sort of understand the work we do and how the work we do relate to public health risk, so that they get a better understanding of where on that sort of risk scale does the work we do relate and fit in. So they take 100 to 150 of these complaints per year and move them into prosecution. So the rest, they're not being prosecuted. They're just gonna either end with a strong closing or be dismissed, or well, those are the two options for the non-prosecution complaints. The way they prioritize these projects or these complaints are really harm to person and level of risk to the public. And then what they said to us in this meeting was, because if we file a complaint with OPR, because we're another state agency, they would investigate our complaint. They wouldn't just dismiss it, because if we file a complaint, it's because we think it's important enough for them to do an investigation. And that was sort of an important piece of information for us to understand, because that means that we need to come up with this decision tree on when to file a complaint before pushing it to them, because they rely on us having that process in place, because once we file a complaint, they will investigate. So then the investigation looks like they'll assign a project out to an investigator, and that investigator will then reach out to all the people involved within that complaint. So they will interview everyone, and they'll collect data, and then based on sort of that investigation, they'll make a determination. And what they said was that either the determination ends up being a strong closing, so they'll close the investigation and say to the person that was a complaint was filed against, say you need to make these changes, or you should consider this in the future, but we're not going to prosecute this situation, this case. And that type of determination is confidential to all. So there won't be any records on the website related to those investigations that are ending with a strong closing. The ones that they do end up prosecuting, they typically involve a hearing, and that hearing will be scheduled 4 to 5 months into the future. And then the investigation happens in that 4 to 5 months period, or the additional investigation happens. And as they said, sometimes these investigations, they're resolved before the hearing. So they may come to the table, all the parties, and then come up with some kind of agreement that then are resolving the issue before the actual hearing. If it ends up with a hearing and then there's a discipline, if the result is this, there's a disciplinary result as part of that hearing, then that determination is available on the OPR's website, and that determination will be available, forever. And then in very few situations, the license is revoked. So 1 to 2 per year, they end up revoking their licenses. And then they said that there's this summary suspension cases. So let's say, for example, there's an investigation taking place, but it's such an imminent risk to the public that they may suspend the license temporarily until the litigation process resolves the issue. So this is sort of the situations where if we say this person is out there doing work that is a public health threat, So even though you haven't decided on the sort of the end result of this investigation, we think together with you, and then they'll decide on it, that the license should be revoked until then. So that's the summary suspension cases. So that was sort of that was the sort of the meeting with OPR, and just to get sort of an understanding of their process, because that helps us sort of understand and inform us in how do we move situations we find problematic into either some level of notification back to you guys, being like, hey, this is not okay. And then how many times do we do that before we then move it into OPR territory? So I'm curious, and I'd like to open it up to the floor, sort of any thoughts on the process and how you think we should, you know, we really love this general permit. It's 31 permits is great, and with it comes a lot of trust, and so we're curious what you think about that sort of auditing process and decision tree. I see your hand up, Wayne.
Yeah, thanks, Silly. Yeah, it makes me not want to do a general permit, I guess, so.
Oh, no.
Well, so a couple things. 31 of the general permits have been issued, and I'm assuming you wouldn't be able to audit anything until it'd been through construction. So I'm just curious how many of those 31 maybe are through completion. So I guess that's the first comment. And then I guess between there, I guess in my opinion, there needs to be an intermediate step. If you guys go through an audit and whatever that number is, but if you find a project or permit that was issued, for whatever reason that something was incorrect or not done appropriately, to me, there needs to be an intermediate step in there. I would assume that you guys, the process of this matrix or tree, whatever, is you would, put those in writing, kind of approach whoever the professional engineer, consultant, or whatever is, say, this is what we found, you agree, give that person a chance to respond. I mean, who knows what the circumstances were, what the issues are. But I would hope that would be kind of the process before, and I guess if that wasn't satisfactory, then beyond that, I guess you file something with OPR, but I would hope that would kind of be the general process that you would go through.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the direction we're leaning. We don't want it to be a punitive thing, but it's a mechanism, it's a lever to pull if we find. So how many notifications can we send out before it's like, it's wasting our time, it's wasting your time? So I think that's the balance we're trying to find. Yeah, but I hear you.
You just got to be careful, because you got practicing engineers that have been in the business for 25, 30 years that have had a completely clean record. And I don't think any of us would want that to happen. So it just makes me a little bit uncomfortable that could go down that path, I guess.
Can I ask just like what situations do you foresee? So you say you're feeling uncomfortable. Are there situations that you foresee this that we should be considerate of in terms of maybe giving more of a flexibility in our determination, or like what makes you uncomfortable about it, I guess?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's kind of like you've gone right from the audit to the OPR, I guess. You need to kind of talk about what that intermediate step is. So you do the audit, if you find a project where there's some concerns or issues raised, okay, I guess, so what's that process? I mean, I assume, again, you're going back to the consultant or whoever signed off on the application to say, this is what we found is, do you agree with this? If you do or don't, what were the circumstances? What's the response? I mean, that's an important piece of this, because I'm hoping that's something that everybody kind of worked through before it ever comes close to getting to filing a complaint with OPR. So that's an important piece of this. It just seems like we're going from the audit right to the OPR thing. So there's some work in between there to develop how this process, I guess, is going to look.
Yeah. I can respond a little bit, but let's see, I see some other hands. Can you help me here on my screen? I think I saw Allison, but I saw someone before Allison on.
Brian Link.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to point out one of the things that was a little concerning to me in your presentation is that the only two examples you had of things that would make you think of sending a complaint to OPR were things that aren't always under the control of the engineer. So construction without a permit. Of course, we always advise our clients that they cannot start construction without a permit, but they don't always listen to us, especially those of us who are working more with private clients and projects that aren't funded by DWSRF. So your office buildings, your commercial projects, probably not a school, but, it does happen from time to time and is out of our control. And then, the other piece being, construction that doesn't match the permitted documents. Well, we can go in and certify something and have seen it and it was all, appropriately tested and built to the spec. And then we leave, we're done with the project. It could be modified later. So those are the kind of things that, certainly allowing the designer to have a chance to respond to those and say, I guess maybe everyone would say it wasn't me, right? But, I think in a lot of cases it may not be, those two particular ones. I would be concerned that those are things that I can't control as a licensed designer 100%. So.
Okay, that's good feedback. Thank you. Yeah. Allison?
I think, well, I wanted to share some more of the context and discussion, I guess, because there's a difference between something maybe not being communicated to you by your client or something that's not within your control, such as the examples that Brian just brought up. And then there's like a purposeful, this project actually includes booster pumps, and you said it was eligible for a general permit. There's some of these liberties some are taking are a little bit beyond what I think most of us think of. So we're not gonna just jump to OPR. There's probably gonna be, oh, well, this is actually acceptable, kind of like different categories, and this is, maybe we need to make it a drinking water sharing session topic because there seems to be a lot of confusion about our expectations about this requirement or how you communicate this or share this information with us. And then there's another bin or category that's deliberately misleading us. And we still want to discuss some of these things, but yeah, I think some of us have a hard time imagining taking such liberties with our certifications and our standards.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, and just to add to what Allison just said, I just want to make it very clear that if those two slides I shared made it sound like we're going to move straight from an audit, finding an issue and moving it to OPR, that was not the intention. The intention was to say, for us to figure out what the decision tree is. So like, how many notifications, what are the notifications? What does that communication with the engineer look like? To then saying, okay, well, we've done all of those things. And in the cases Allison is talking about where, well, this was so potentially deliberately a lie in that certification process, what are sort of the other options we have? And so that was the conversation we had with OPR, was to say, if in the end, that is the, it is our way to deal with it, what does that even look like? Because we didn't know, no one within our team had sort of a full understanding of OPR's process. And if we then started like filing complaints and they took everything up into an investigation because they think it's important enough and we thought they would sort it out, then that would be, that wouldn't be what we intended with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say more on that, like that, I think Wayne, what you were referencing, like, there's this intermediate step. The discussion with OPR really taught us that it would not be a good thing for us to just send every issue that we observe without investigating what it is or putting some kind of context on how important it was. If we just sent those all to OPR expecting them to figure out what was important and what wasn't, there would be some real consequences to everybody for doing that, and we'd be wasting OPR's time more than likely, and we'd be dragging people into this process when there wasn't any reason to.
Chat. I guess I can stop sharing my slides. Please make sure you're doing your due diligence and check with the division about outstanding deficiencies or PTO compliance items. Systems often think they have resolved issues but haven't documented them to us. Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the things that are part of our eligibility questions also if there are any deficiencies unresolved. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, that also is one of the topics in the PER work that we're doing is we want to make sure that the sanitary surveys and permit to operates are a part of those PERs or referenced in them as well. So that makes it on. That's one of the checklist items that we've started including for our discussions on that other topic as well.
Yeah, one more comment, and this is again, Wayne, to something you said. You're right, you know, these projects, these 31 general permits that's been issued, they haven't gone through construction, or maybe some of them have. I didn't check on that. So obviously the auditing process is not gonna happen until that we're there. I think the intention with sharing that we're thinking about this at this point was to get this feedback from you and sort of get your discomfort and your thoughts on and things we should consider as part of our auditing process, because we're just starting it. Really, we haven't, because as you said, these projects haven't been implemented yet, so we're not there yet, but we're starting the conversations and starting to think about them. And just wanted to share that with you all.
And I mean, the general permit is, we really like it. We want that to continue. And so part of the auditing process is to just be able to have the data that says this is working.
All right. Anything we can definitely end it a little bit before time, or if anyone has anything else besides these two topics they want to share here, we have 6 more minutes we can definitely use for anything else.
Maybe just a little bit more context on the PER focus is also that we received more than twice as many PERs this year than we did the previous year. And so that uptick is concerning to us, both from a workload standpoint and it was a bottleneck for these projects. So clarifying our expectations and our review process is part of making sure, as Willie said, that our efforts are commensurate with the scope of the projects.
Awesome. All right, well, let's then end it here. If no one has any more comments, we will get 5 minutes back of your time. Thank you so much for joining. And feel free to send any comments if you have any, if this sort of is, you know, creating some thoughts and you want to share them after the fact, feel free to reach out, and we'll make sure to consider them. And then, as Willis said in the beginning, these sharing sessions, we've been using them to sort of share, but really the hope is that you guys would have topics that you wanted to share with the bigger group, as well. So if you feel like it, if you have anything, then by all means, let us know and we can add that to the next meeting agenda. Otherwise, you'll just have to continue listening to us talking. All right, thank you. Wait a minute. I was thinking we could spend 3 minutes debriefing, but I'm gonna let Dexter leave the meeting as well.
Well, we can just
There we
let it
go.
run. I mean, we're still recording too.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's true.